We are live at the latest episode of Consultervation. Last week, I flew solo with Sammy Coakley from Spire Blue, one of our legacy team in the US. This week, staying in the creative space, spas and salons last week. This week, we're speaking to Michele from Nova Botanics in Dunkeld, Scotland, local to us, not miles away like the last few episodes with people from all over the planet. And also back with us today is Kevin Turnbull. Kevin Turnbull, it's good to have you back, my friend.
It's great to be here, Dave. Sorry I missed last week. I was doing something really important and I can't remember what that was.
But it was so important, Kev. We did mention it in the show that you were really doing something really serious. Now, we have with us Michele. So, Michele, tell me, what is it you actually do?
Oh, now you're going to make me explain myself. What don't I do creatively? At the minute, we're do sort of traditional, less traditional floristry in the events business. We've launched a concept store in Dunkeld, which kind of sits with our aesthetic in terms of homewares and the retail element that kind of extends from our events business. And on top of that, I also do photography. So ultimately, we're kind of a creative business that focuses on all things creative.
And I would like to concur, Kevin, that she's definitely creative. Debbie and Michele commissioned something, I don't know what you even call it, in our dining room. What is it?
It's a flower cloud. I suppose an installation made by dried flowers. It's kind of like a flower sculpture, if we could call it that.
So how long have you been in business, Michele?
So with Nova, realistically, we've only been, this is our 4th month in terms of us being launched as a store. So 4 months.
Why? Yeah.
As in, why only 4 months? Well, I mean, I think it's kind of looking back. I mean, I've been in the photography wedding industry business for the last 6 years. And then the same reason why you think I'm mad is what actually propelled the launch of Nova. So COVID ultimately was the foundation to stepping into Nova and taking the leap, because the photography side of my business and the bulk of what I was doing came to a complete standstill. So pretty much rock bottom kind of propelled innovation and kind of stepping into the Dunkeld space. I don't think we would have launched Nova if we didn't have the right space come up. I think that was a really big fundamental part of us moving forward on the project. And Dunkeld was this unique creative little hub that I fell in love with, that just suited our business perfectly, and competitively in a creative side of things. You know, in Scotland, in our industry, there's a huge amount of talent. The wedding industry, you're looking at probably around about 58% of weddings now happening in Scotland. It's a real destination for the less traditional big white wedding. So creatively, around this area in Perthshire with your elopement market and things like that, there wasn't really a business that sat at this end. Glasgow, Edinburgh, really quite full to the brim of talent. So it was an opportunity, and it actually happened quite organically through finding Dunkeld and really kind of being inspired by it through meeting people within my industry, within the wedding industry, through photographing couples that lived in Dunkeld, becoming friends with them, and getting to know folk in Dunkeld. And I just thought there was a little bit of a gap for what we were doing.
Kevin, what's your experience of Dunkeld?
No, it was a long while ago because I was there as a child, and as part of the Trossachs and all of that. So it was, I think we were on holiday there in a large caravan, and I thought it was like a magical place.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I really did.
This hidden gem. There's something that you fall in love with when you come to Dunkeld.
Yeah.
It's quite funny because growing up, I was always coming up and down the A9 from Elgin, and you'd pass Dunkeld, like you'd pass all these towns the further south you go, and you dismiss them. Like, what's the one that's just down the road beginning with Black something? Which is now near us. you'd be going past it going, oh, it doesn't matter, who cares about that? And actually, I had friends at school who went on holiday to Dunkeld, and driving past on the A9, you kind of think to yourself, why? But living here now, I totally understand it. It's a special little town, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's a town as well in the last sort of 12 to, I suppose in the last sort of 12 months there's a lot of newness to it. So you've got the traditional element and the attraction of the surrounding and just the place and the location. But there's been a little bit more of I don't know, I think COVID was a really scary time for all of us in the industry, in any industry you were at. But it actually had probably a positive effect on Dunkeld. We've got a lot of new business and a lot of like-minded creatives, whether you're in a non-creative field, there's definitely a point of uniqueness here in terms of people trying to do things a little differently, pushing the boundaries, reinvesting, and not standing still or not taking things lying down. And I think that's really why Nova works here and why it's, I mean, we're still babies. We're 4 months in, we've hit the ground running, but I think location-wise, this wouldn't have been as successful so far if it was anywhere else.
And how have you found going from changing direction from your photography side and opening, what is a retail store in a world of retail? If you read the tabloids in Britain, Michele, Kevin, anywhere in the world, the internet has taken over. The retail is dying as a space. There are lots of great business owners doing their best to survive on the high street. What was the driving you to bring this store to life?
Oh, that's a bit of a loaded question. I think it's very much about past leading into now. I think my experience since I've come into the UK, which is now 21 years ago, I've got a real, I suppose up until 8 years ago, before I relocated up to Scotland, I was quite well rehearsed in sort of the retail world and the corporate world. So at that time, if you'd said to me I'd be doing creative 8 years down the line, I would have laughed at you. So it's just been a really organic way where I'm a self-taught photographer, fell in love with it, and then ran with it. And I kind of feel it's retailing with the difference. There's, it's a uniqueness. It's a bit more of a lifestyle brand. The addition of the store was pretty much the foundation on an advert for everything else. We're a visual business. So for us, if you can see it, you can really identify with it. If it's tactile, you can really, you can see it, you can envision what it's going to look like from an events point of view. The store, in terms of the retail element that we put in, was the space we had. We couldn't justify that just for a floristry business. So it was about taking the floristry elements a little step further. And we style for weddings and events, so why wouldn't we be selling that product to a more niche market? And then the avenues which we would do that within kind of work cohesively together. That's the idea. So if we look at our first month of launching with no advertising, we booked 5 couples off the back of them just visiting our store. And that's because it looked and felt like they could see and be like, we want what you're going to do. They could feel the point of difference that we did. We could then openly talk about our services in an environment they were standing in. So it wasn't very much about, I think it's that link and relationship between the retail element, but then also really kind of the services that we offer, and the styling and the creative elements of what we offer. I'm really well rehearsed, and I can definitely know what I'm talking about creatively, but it's really hard for somebody who's not in that industry or doesn't live and breathe it to really understand it. If you've got a visual point of view that people understand and feel more comfortable in, they can imagine it and they get it. So I think it's very much, the store is very much an advert for what we do, and a space where people, I think it's the values and fundamentals of our business that drive it. So we've really thought about the core values of create, play, and we host workshops out of here. So we've really utilized the space, not just for a retailing point of view. We're trying to do things really differently, and not restrict ourselves in terms of how we use our space, and what we stock. And I think that's probably the thought process behind retailing, but retailing with a bit more of a theatre vibe to it, if that makes sense to what I'm trying to say. We're constantly creating in it. People can see you create it, they're interested in it, they come in. So you've got a different theatre and feel to what you're driving as a product, which all feeds into
what I like is I like, and Kev, I've seen this with my own eyes, is that I've seen people come into your stall and they're for whatever reason they've come to Dunkeld for the day, and they stroll into the store, they see something they've been looking for, haven't been able to get it from other places, and there and then they either order it or you send it to them, and you seem to have no limit to your reach, whether it's like you said, the events, the floristry features, but with multiple ways of doing, the botanics that you do. But I have to say, you also take care of people, I think, particularly well. Kev, what do you think of all of this?
Well, I take a bit of exception to your first headline, Dave, and that was starting a business in the last year. Are you mad? I'm not sure. That's just a bit too black and white. And there has been a pandemic, there has been lockdowns, consumer behavior has definitely changed. You might not want to have been in entertainment and travel and tourism too much, but there's plenty of businesses that have thrived. And I think, Michele, because you're coming at the end of the pandemic, let's just say, and certainly the propensity for lockdown is moving away, I think there's a pent-up demand for creativity because people want to, have something expressed to them. There's a pent-up demand for health and wellness. There's definitely a pent-up demand for events like weddings. We had 2 in our village just on Saturday as people are frantically trying to make up for lost time. So I think, like all things, it's about timing and about being bold with your decision making. I've got a client who's in the he's in the gym and wellness space, and he does home gyms, so more weight oriented than anything. His turnover in the pandemic went up from 4 million to 16. Now it's going to go down again, but it's not going to go back down to 4. They'll probably have a running rate of about 12. So he's doubled his business because people will buy things that we want to buy, even if you have to go through a different channel. So that's what I'd say. That's what I'd say, Mr. Evans.
I think we're a business that not necessarily people. We don't operate in the arena of need. So people don't need what we have. When they see it, they would ideally like it. But I think it's knowing your audience, and I think going that extra mile, the more personal service. The market's changing so much in terms of retailers, big retailers. Shop local, shop small. There's a real support for it at the minute. So I think people are craving more of a personal experience and something that is a little left field of what they've seen. It's just about pushing the boundaries, creatively and through the traditional realms of what we do. But I think being a bit more bold and not standing still, and I think going that extra mile, I think for us is such a big part of what we do. It doesn't work without that. I think we're a premium. We probably sit more premium in terms of our price point for what we offer versus a more commercial florist or a more traditional florist. But ultimately our reach in terms of creativity is a little bit more experimental. So that kind of has that sort of feel to it. And I think the response to that has been really positive. But I think it's also because they've stumbled along something that they didn't expect to. And then really, I suppose our job and role is to give them a visual and talk to them about why they need it or why they'd want it, but give them ideas of things they can do differently. And I think that's a huge position within Nova. It's that, we can create, I think within our industry, typically people are only really wanted to kind of do something for an event or for a wedding, but how do we translate that into everyday lives is something that we are really focused on. So whether it be an installation in Dave and Debbie's house, we've done it. But it's kind of exploring those different creative options. And I think it is really very much about, I suppose the core of all of it is being super passionate about what you do. People buy into that. And ultimately, that is pretty much the foundation of my business is I love what I do. I'm not someone who does creative things. I live my life really creative. So I think that's just staying true to what, I mean, that's the core of Nova. And I think that's what we've launched. So when we got the keys, we were open 5 weeks later. It really just spilled out of me. It was like, right, go. And 5 weeks later, the doors were open. And I think we're still figuring out a lot of the path of that we're going to take and what's working, what isn't working. But the response to all of it has been overall really positive.
You know, there's an example of what you talk about, Michele, right in front of the three of us now. Because if you look at your Zoom backdrop, you've got a nice natural outdoor look. Michele, you've got something that is actually quite beautiful. I've got a wonky curtain. I want what Michele's got. I don't need it. I just want it.
It's a great example, Kev, and it entirely is about having that choice and bringing those ideas in. I really like that, bringing the ideas that are created, not just for one-off events, but into everyday life. So how do you keep yourself going on tough days, Michele? How do you get through that?
Ooh. That's a loaded question. I don't want to get emotional here. Do you know what? I think
Go on, you can do it.
I think if you're just constantly aware of why you're doing it, revisiting the why, I think it's always a bigger picture. I think I also remind myself daily that, this is, when everybody gets tired, everybody gets overwhelmed, everybody gets, oh my God, a million things thrown at you. Our industry, we've got 3 weddings this week. We've got installations tonight. We're running a store. We're running a team. There's a huge amount on. It's me at the minute and a really small team. I think conversation keeps me going. Really celebrating the small wins every day, being really aware of them, even when you're tired. I think it's just about, you can get so focused on what you still have to achieve that you forget what you have achieved so far. And I think it's really important to remind yourself, even when people around you might be wanting a million things from you, that you're one person and that ultimately, the small successes, you will get there if you remain focused. So I think I'm naturally quite self-motivated, quite stubborn in my determination. But I think I'm really passionate about what I do and I love it. I genuinely love what I do. So keeping me going on bad days is just focusing on that. Feel really lucky and grateful to be doing. Not everybody can say that they're doing what they love as a living. If you ask me what my hobbies were, it would be photography and floristry.
Yeah,
I live and breathe that every day and share it. And I think that's, I think finding also stepping away if you're feeling overwhelmed, for me, or having a bad day, is step into something that you feed off. Conversation with me, with my team, with my, with couples, just really positive aspects of your business. Step away from something that might be tearing it, give it time, and distract yourself with the things that you fundamentally find at ease. And I'm surrounded by amazing outdoors, so if it ever gets too much, I just get my dogs and I run. So, and we're outside and we're having a bit of a walk and downtime. But I think getting myself through any of the challenging times, I think, from the outside in, it might look easy, but it's not. No day's easy. I think you've got to constantly be focused and adapt and shift and do a million different things in a day. But positivity and just gratitude for what you're doing, and just celebrating the small wins, because that ultimately, for me, will lead to the bigger wins later on down the line.
Right. So go on, Kev.
I was going to say, Michele, I just love that positivity. And I think everyone can learn from that. If you're positive and enthusiastic about what you do, and people I come across generally aren't, they do a job for living reasons. They're not living their job, if you see what I mean. But that enthusiasm is great. And when you mentioned, think about your why and your purpose. Dave and I do this in coaching all the time, but I went through it personally when I moved to LA, because I'd been a CEO in the UK for 20 odd years with different companies. And I moved there and I didn't really know what I was going to do. But I worked through a purpose. What I want to give back was my purpose. And so my why is kind of, I want to inspire people through my coaching to be the best they can be.
Yeah.
And that's a kind of central call for me, and I'm really enthusiastic about it. It makes me happy, it makes me, it empowers me, it's just great. So I kind of live that. So I'm just echoing what you said, and I think that's a fantastic thing to have.
I think when you love what you do, you're always better at it. And that sounds crazy. I think you do have to find the arena where you challenge yourself and don't just stick to what you know. I think that's a huge part. I think discomfort and that uncomfortable position of what do I do now is what Nova was born out of. There are a couple of things that I suppose I've overcome personally within my life over those sort of the disappointments in my personal life over the last 3 years led to that motivation. That I think once you overcome challenges and the more, dare I say, life experience you get, and that's often not the nicer things that you learn. You obviously sometimes have to go through some more difficult, challenging things in your life that ultimately define the direction you really want to be in, and I suppose make you really passionate about the things that matter to you. So I think if you focus on the things that you're really enthusiastic and are able to kind of really share that with people, then you're always going to be more positive, and that can be your driver. And people realize that when you're sincere and authentic in your reason, I think people naturally will always react to that, or that's your hope, that people would genuinely go along that journey with you.
Right. I've had a couple of conversations in the last since the weekend with a couple of people that work up in the city of London, because the village I live in is in the commuter belt. It's about 35 minutes into a mainline station, and those people have flourished in lockdown because they've been working from home. They realized it was a bit intimidating at first, but they realized they can do it. And then all of a sudden, the financial companies that they work for are saying, we want you back in the office now for, 4 days a week. And you can see them draining of enthusiasm. And I mean, I used to commute into London from here, from this village in Bedfordshire. And, I was in a really well-paid job as a senior director of a big multinational. And frankly, I hated it. It just sucked all the enthusiasm out of me because I had an hour and a half commute each way. I had a first-class train ticket and I could never get a seat. So by the time I got up to the local station, my back was killing me. I was angry. I was upset. And of course, I left eventually because, life is worth more than that. But that point about enthusiasm and channeling that into what you do and doing a better job because of the enthusiasm is absolutely right.
I love it. And just recapping a couple of things today so far, that here we are in this season's episode. We're talking to Michele Lamb from Nova Botanics, and she's been sharing with us loads of amazing things about remembering your why, keeping your conversations going, how to manage yourself when things are tougher, recalling the small successes, remembering what you've done so far, and staying totally tuned in to why you're doing things. And if you're lucky enough to have hobbies that are your business, then you are most likely to do them better than anything else. I mean, that's just a few samples of the richness of our conversational tapestry today so far in this podcast. So right. I'd like to ask you, go on, Kev.
I was going to say, Michele, actually no, you finish, Dave. I've got a point that's separate to what you're talking about.
Is there, we'll come straight back to Kevin, but Michele, is there anything you'd like to ask Kevin or I? Because it's only fair to make the conversation both ways. Kev, what was the point you wanted to say while Michele dreams up?
Well, I was going to say that your creative world, and you've got a store, and you deliver, and you've got different channels to market, which I think is great, because that creativity generally can't be bought. So you can go on Amazon, and there's tons of stuff there. I mean, everything you could possibly want is almost there, apart from the creativity side of it all. But what do you think of online platforms like Etsy, which a kind of craft-based. They position themselves as more creative. And the title of this podcast is Creative Businesses That Flourish. Etsy seems to be doing really well, and you can get quirky stuff there. It's handmade and hand built and all of that. What do you think? What do you think of that?
I think there's an absolute need for it. I think the creative industry is in some is I suppose like any other. What's the word? I think, for us, then creativity and people that are creatives work really hard to achieve what they do. They're not always financially rewarded for it. I think being a creative takes time to produce what you're doing. So you're naturally not able to, you're never going to have unless the independents that work from home, there's an absolute place for them. I think what you mentioned there in terms of Amazon, you can get everything. Amazon's USP as a business is the reason why I'm successful, and the reason why Etsy as a brand and platform will be successful is because not everybody wants what you can get at a click of a finger, or it's great for convenience. And I think, we are very much, now this is probably getting a little bit deep, but we are a bit of a lazy society, and we want instant gratification, I need that now delivered there. And there is an absolute need for it and position for it. But I think creativity is the reverse of that. I think there's something really rewarding when you buy something that's been handmade, that is supporting somebody who, whether it be, a mom that is creating, and that's what Etsy's there for, they creating a financial support for their family on a smaller scale. It's just as important as somebody purchasing something from Amazon. I think there is an absolute need for it. When you look at the high street in general, your independents are going to be, in my opinion, something that take a bit more of a lead role. Otherwise our high streets are going to stand empty. So platforms like Etsy give people the opportunity to make a living from what they love doing.
Right.
What that looks like. And I think so, and the consumer that's buying from there loves looking for that product and loves the idea of giving something that's, number one, more thoughtful, whether it be a gift or something for their home. It's been created for them and not on mass scale. So, Nova's, we don't import any of our fresh flowers, so we're a sustainable business that supports local growers. That comes to a significant cost to our business in the sense where our season's shorter. Sorry, big tractor going past. But, for us, that was incredibly important because that was, we didn't want our business to sit with anything that's accessible to the mainstream. So anybody that stumbles along us, whether it be online or on coming to visiting Dunkeld, I want them to find that niche product that they're not going to find everywhere else. So yeah, Amazon's USP is very much our USP in the sense where we don't want to be able to be accessible to everybody just yet. And we want the product that we do and what we create, and whether it be for event or in store or deliver online, it's not something that's readily available anywhere else. So, and that's Etsy's position, and I think there is an absolute place for it in the market. And it's incredibly vital, in particular, when fashion retail and all these other retailers are disappearing, right? Because I think there's a real movement and support for local business. And I think as we develop as a society and keep looking at the issues that are facing us, those things are going to have to be a need that we consider, from all aspects of what we do. So that's touching onto a bit of a deeper topic, I think. But love Etsy, support them, support any independent. And they've stayed true to who they are. I think Etsy as a platform have really stayed true to who they are. Not on the high street, changed their structure slightly, which meant they became a bit more commercial. So the independents that were creating, unless you had a certain format, you weren't able to sell on that platform anymore. So that again became slightly more controversial for the creatives that were really part of that platform. So I think if you're going to be a business that delivers those creatives, then I think stay true to it, you know, and really support their independence, because there is a need for them.
Fabulous answer. And do you have a question you'd like to ask Kevin?
Well, I suppose really for me, you guys have got like this crazy business experience and done so much in your careers. So, I mean, if there was one bit of, I'm going to obviously use my time with you. biggest lessons you've learned along the way in business.
Kevin?
I think for me, a continuing lesson is managing your time well. You know, I was talking to a lady a couple of nights ago over dinner, and she was saying she kind of prides herself on clearing her inbox every day. And I told her that is just a complete waste of time, because in your inbox are things that are important and things that are urgent, but it's almost always somebody else's urgency.
Yeah.
So you're responding to not your urgent things, but to somebody else's urgent things at the expense of things that are important to you. So just understanding that important and urgent, I keep catching myself, you know, because, you know, particularly when you're on the internet and you're on email and you're on social media, you're responding to stuff, but most of it is interference and clutter.
Noise.
And getting to the important things are essential. So that's I learn that lesson every week, but it's something that I've learned in business probably for the last 30 odd years.
And my answer, as the phone rings randomly, hopefully Debbie will intercept it. I can't stop it. It'll just ring away. I have a personal one and a business one, Kev. Is that allowed? So the personal one is work out your daily recipe for getting the best out of yourself. You know, work it out. It doesn't matter what it is. Doesn't matter how advanced it is, how simple it is, or even you might even think it's silly. Know your best recipe for yourself and get into that ritual of doing it every day. That's personal. And then on the business front, Kev, you're going to love this one. Build yourself a success framework. You know, a success framework allows me to disconnect completely from my own paradigms, perceptions, forced ambition, passion, you know, enthusiasm, Michele. It stops Dave getting in the way of the right decision. And therefore, that's my second tip, is build one of these. Anyway, good question, Michele. Great advert, Kev.
Well, I'd actually throw in another one, because I use this a lot, Dave, and it's one of yours. It's one of Real Leadership Coaching. That optimum performance equals potential. You know, what you can possibly do minus interference, and it's getting rid of the interference side of the stuff that's bombarding you every day, that will maximize your potential and definitely maximize your performance. So think about that interference all the time.
I would have to say that I think that's been the biggest learning so far within Nova and the launch of the business, when you're juggling so much and there's a huge demand. There's a demand, everybody needs you. There's one of you. And ultimately you want to be there for everybody. I'm a people pleaser, 100%. But I'm learning that ultimately for me to deliver the best that I can deliver, the power of no, or the power of managing expectation. Because you're right, I think you said something really valid there. There's a real sense of urgency from certain tasks in hand, but they might not be urgent to you, but to the other individual, they probably are. And it's that balance between, I suppose, managing expectations for both sides on that. And I think for me, the biggest learning moving forward is going to be how I manage, I suppose, my goal and stay true to that and drown out that noise when you're still trying to be there for the people within your business, your clients, your customers. So yeah, the how of that is what I'm still trying to figure out without feeling the guilt of it. but I would say that's probably the one thing that certainly over the last 2 months that has been so clear is that am I spending my time doing the things that ultimately feed the reason why I'm here?
Good, really good.
On that, Dave, you know, a real life case example, if you will. One of my clients claimed that his issue was anger management because he was very stroppy with his team. But his issue wasn't anger management. His issue was managing. So he'd give an example of, you know, I'm deep in doing a project work that needs to be done for a client, blah, blah, blah. And one of his team comes up and interrupts him and he goes ballistic. Can't you see him busy, blah, blah, blah. And I told him that the way to handle that is just to say to the person that's come up to you, your team member who works for you, that, you know, I'm really busy and I need to finish this bracket because it's important, close bracket. But I know that your question is urgent, so can we get together at 10:30 and I'll give you as much time as you need. So I've got the time to finish what I need to do, which is important, and I'm managing well by giving one of my direct reports time, but I'm managing how I do it. And it sounds terribly simple, but a lot of people just don't understand it, or if they understand it, they don't do it. You know, they need you. Yeah, come in, you know, interrupt me, and you know, I lose my train of thought, and what's your problem? And that's not very urgent or important, is it? But I'm giving you the time of day at the wrong time of day. And I think that was a great lesson that he learned, and he's become a superstar now because he's really embraced all of this stuff. But managing those different priorities and managing interference, it's essential. And and the people who do it are the leaders. I'll be honest with you.
I agree. And go ahead, Michele.
No, go on, Dave.
I was just going to say, with so many good lessons to pull out of this to anyone listening to the show, Consultervation, and I'm really excited by the depth of what we've had to say. Michele, is there anything you'd like to say about Nova as a finishing idea?
Oh, repeat that. Sorry, Dave. As a finishing idea.
Yeah, as we bring our wonderful conversation to a natural conclusion, is there any last thing you'd like us to discuss, go over, consider?
Oh, no, I don't know. This put me on the spot. Come and see us. Come and create with us. That's it, pretty much. I think with Nova, we just obviously watch the space. We'll keep doing what we're doing, taking head down and focusing on what we do. And yeah, doing what I love. So pretty much parting comment on that one. Sorry.
Marvelous. So, Kev, any reflections from you on the show today?
I think that was really good. That was really great conversation. Thank you, Michele, very much. I appreciate it from my end. It's really interesting talking to people who have got the guts to start up businesses, you know, during a difficult time. But you know, the opportunity is always there in my view. That okay, you might not want to be in hospitality or start a pub because no one can go to it, but there are tons of other opportunities that work no matter what the pandemic or whatever it might be. So bravo to you for doing that, and I think you're on a winner.
Can I say something before we part just off the back of that already? I think really kind of the one thing I'd say that stops most people from following on from is fear. And the one thing I would say with Nova is, is leaning into fear, not ignoring it, because I think it's got a fundamental place in success. But I think, we can do hard things. I think starting up a business isn't easy. It's absolutely hard work. You've got to live and breathe it. You've got to be passionate about it. And you've got to overcome fear of failure pretty early on. And kind of, there's no such thing as that. There's only, for me, learning. So I think as long as anybody starting a business or is in business is learning every day and not becoming complacent, they will always be successful because they'll always take a step forward. Whether it's a small one or a big one, they'll do that. So for me, that's a really big thing. So,
well, I have to say, Kev, Michele, right at the last minute, done one of these. Just to make the point right at the end of the show. A top tip: always have the right props in your drawer, Kev. Right. Anyway, if you're watching Consultervation today, we've been talking to Michele Lamb from Nova Botanics in Dunkeld. Did you know, as an interesting fact, that Scotland has 58% of the weddings going on, and is the go-to destination to have a traditional wedding of any backdrop? That's an extraordinary fact we learned live today. But I have to say, finishing the show in style, lean into fear, move through it with action and see what happens, and be bold are just some of the brave messages throughout this episode of Consultervation. And as we play this back and you're listening to us, consultants and business owners, having a conversation today, there's so much to do and to think about. All it leaves me to say is thank you, first of all, Kevin, for being back with us from your really important work.
I remembered what I was doing last week, actually, so I'm not going to tell you.
That's brilliant. And secondly,
But I could have been at the Ivy.
There you go. And having a really important meal over dinner meeting or something. Michele, thank you so much for spending your time with us and letting us into the creative world that is your life. I appreciate that. So thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
And to everybody listening, every success with your learning.